Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
So today we're going to dive into something that, well, it might just stop you in your tracks. Think about this. If you live to 80, you get about 4,000 weeks.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that number, I mean, it can feel absurdly short, right? Almost terrifyingly, insultingly short.
It definitely hits you when you hear it like that, yeah.
Yeah,
But what's really interesting here, I think, is that it's not actually meant to be terrifying. It's framed more as this kind of profound invitation, to completely redefine how you relate to time.
okay.
And this whole deep dive, it's based on this really captivating book that just throws out all our usual modern ideas about time management and productivity, all that stuff.
Exactly. So our mission today really is to unpack why those typical methods, the time hacking, the productivity systems,
Mm-hmm.
why they often leave us feeling, frankly, more overwhelmed, more anxious, maybe even a bit empty.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to explore this maybe more liberating way to live within our limits, the fact that we are finite, and hopefully discover what actually matters in, well, your 4,000 weeks.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Okay, so let's start with this paradox, this modern thing.
Okay.
Why does trying so hard to be productive often just make us feel worse? I mean, you see all these productivity gurus, right? They're everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all about, like, cranking through tasks, getting that perfect morning routine down, batch cooking your meals.
Squeezing every last drop out of the minute.
Right. But what's the real issue with that whole approach? What's wrong with it?
Well, the key insight, I think, from the source material is just how narrow it all is. These systems, they're laser focused on efficiency, on output, but they almost never seem to consider, like, making space for just experiencing wonder.
Yeah.
Or, engaging with the big stuff, the critical global issues like climate change or, well, pandemics recently.
Yeah.
It's like we're optimizing for, I don't know, the wrong things entirely. We're kind of missing what it actually means to be human in the process.
That makes so much sense. It really does feel like time is this unstoppable conveyor belt, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Just bringing new tasks, new emails, new demands, just as fast as we clear the old ones. And the kicker is, the more productive you get.
The faster the belt goes.
Exactly, it speeds up. So it's really no wonder we hear so much about burnout, like this bone-deep burnout, especially maybe among younger adults. The book mentions them feeling like these finely honed tools crafted to be lean, mean production machines.
Yeah, and it makes you ask, why are we constantly pushing for more? There's that interesting point about John Maynard Keynes, the economist.
Oh, right, the 1930 prediction.
Exactly. He predicted that, by around now, we'd all be working maybe 15 hours a week because of wealth and technology.
Yeah, and clearly not.
Clearly not. So what happened? Well, instead of just enjoying more leisure time, we find new things we need. We aspire to new lifestyles. We're always trying to keep up. And being busy, weirdly, it becomes this, like, an emblem of prestige. It's a status symbol.
Right. So, okay, we're doing all this stuff. We're incredibly busy, but there's often this nagging feeling underneath it all, isn't there? That we're rarely getting around to the things that actually feel important, the right things.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of yearn for more meaning, maybe, or, more fulfilling ways to spend our time, but we seem to just systematically do other things instead. It's a huge disconnect.
It really is. And it sort of hints that maybe our whole understanding of time itself is, well, a bit off.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings us neatly to how our actual concept of time has changed over the centuries.
Right. Because it feels so normal to us now, but it's actually a pretty peculiar modern idea, isn't it? This concept of time as some separate abstract thing, a resource.
Yeah, like something you can measure and fill up.
Exactly. Like we picture it as a calendar grid or maybe a ruler or that conveyor belt idea, again, these containers passing by that we have to fill. And if we fill them, okay, we feel good, we're staying on top of things. But if we don't, we feel like we've wasted it.
Right. Guilt.
Yeah. How different was it, say, back in medieval times?
Oh, completely different. It's a stark contrast. So think about a medieval farmer. Their life was governed by what the book calls task orientation.
Task orientation.
Yeah. So the rhythm of life just came naturally from the tasks themselves. You milk the cows when the cows need milking, right? You harvest the crops when it's harvest time.
Makes sense.
There wasn't this external clock or schedule imposing itself. And they didn't seem to have this anxiety, this pressure to get everything done, partly because, well, the work was kind of infinite. There was always more to do.
So they weren't trying to clear a backlog in the same way.
Exactly. And if they needed to describe how long something took, they didn't use minutes or hours. They'd compare it to other concrete activities, like the time it takes to say a prayer, misere while, or even,
Wait, a pissing while? Seriously.
seriously, a pissing while. It really grounds it in physical reality, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Mhm.
Okay, so if that was the more maybe natural way, what happened? What changed things so drastically? How did time become this thing we manage?
Well, the big shift really came with the Industrial Revolution. That seems to be the
It's
consensus.
like factories and stuff.
Yeah. Before that, you might get paid for, a day's work, which was pretty vaguely defined.
Mm.
But with factories, suddenly hourly pay became much more common. And you even had factory owners, like this guy Ambrose Crowley, complaining about workers stealing time.
Stealing time.
Oh. By smoking, singing, reading, or in any way loitering. Basically, anything other than working during the paid hour was seen as theft. And that really cemented this idea of time as something measurable, a commodity you could buy, sell, or steal.
Wow. And what are the consequences of that shift that we still feel today?
Oh, huge consequences. Once time becomes a resource, you feel this pressure, right, to use it well.
Mhm.
And if you have too much to do, the only answer seems to be, well, get more efficient or work longer hours. And it also makes multitasking seem really attractive. Each apparently complained about this even back then, people thinking, with a watch in one's hand. And maybe worst of all, our sense of self-worth gets completely tangled up in how we use our time. It becomes this thing we feel we have to dominate, to control.
But even with all that pressure, the book mentions these moments of,
Mm.
what was it, deep time.
Yeah, deep time.
What's that about? How does that fit in?
So deep time is described as this feeling of timelessness, really, an expansive experience. Like you're in a realm where there is enough of everything.
Okay.
People like Richard Rohr talk about it, moments where that boundary between you and the world gets kind of blurry and time just seems to stop, or at least slow right down.
Where do you find that?
Well, the book gives examples like being with babies, before they're on schedules, they're the ultimate task-orientated beings. They can pull you out of clock time right into deep time.
Yeah, I can see that.
And Carl Jung apparently describes something similar visiting Kenya, just watching herds of animals feeling plunged into this timeless state. It's that feeling of just being, rather than constantly doing.
Okay, right. So we have this deep time, but mostly we're stuck in clock time trying to be efficient. And that leads straight into what the author calls the efficiency trap. It feels like you must do more than you can do,
Oh.
but that's literally impossible, isn't it? Logically.
Exactly, you nailed it. Logically, you cannot do more than you can do. It's impossible. But that feeling that we must, it's like a symptom of this constant background anxiety, this worry that our tasks won't fit into the hours we have.
And why do we cling to that impossible feeling?
Well, the book argues it's because it stops us from facing the painful truth of our limitations,
Which is?
which is that we have to make hard choices. We can't do everything, so we have to decide which balls are we going to drop, which people might we disappoint, which ambitions maybe need to be let go of.
Oh,
And instead of facing that, we just try to cram more in, get busier, run faster on the conveyor belt.
so the goalposts just keep moving further away. You figure out how to fit more in, and then suddenly more things seem important or urgent or necessary.
Mm.
There's that guy, Arnold Bennett, who wrote a book way back in 1908, How to Live on 24 Hours a Day. And he thought if you just followed his system, you'd feel peaceful.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Right. It wasn't true then, and it's definitely not true now. It's like that Parkinson's law thing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion.
Exactly.
Right.
And it seems to apply to, well, pretty much everything, not just work tasks.
Totally. And this isn't just about your overflowing inbox or the laundry pile either. The book talks about a deeper kind of overwhelm, like existential overwhelm.
Existential overwhelm. What does that mean?
Well, it ties into how in the modern world, maybe without a widespread belief in an afterlife, but with this strong belief in progress, people feel this intense pressure to cram their one life full of experiences, to make the absolute most of it. A sociologist, Hartmut Rosa, apparently pointed out that pre-modern people weren't so bothered by this because they figured, earthly life is just the warm-up act for eternity.
Right.
But now, for many, this is it. So everything depends on optimizing this life, which leads to this constant fear of missing out, this pain about the future you won't get to experience.
And it gets even trickier, doesn't it, with all the convenience we have now. These industries promising to save us time, eliminate chores, but somehow life just gets worse, or at least more frantic.
Yeah, it's one of the big paradoxes. Convenience backfires. It frees up time, sure, but that time immediately gets filled with Well, more expectations, more things we feel we have to do.
Hmm.
Plus, we lose something valuable in the process. The book calls them the unsmoothed textures of life, those little frictions, those moments that actually build relationships or
Like
resilience.
what, for example?
Well, think about Apple Pay. It removes the tiny friction of getting out your wallet, maybe having a brief interaction, or instant coffee versus the ritual of actually brewing it. These time savers seem to strip away something meaningful.
So they cost us more than they save, in a way.
In a way, yeah. There's a great example of someone pushing back against this, Sylvia Kismot. She's a Bible scholar who actually left her university job to live on a farm in rural Canada.
Wow.
Yeah. And her winter days, they start with lighting a wood fire, for warmth, for cooking. She deliberately embraces what most of us would see as inconvenience
My.
because she realized it fostered a more mindful connection with her family, with their surroundings. She figured out she couldn't build a more meaningful life by saving time, but actually by giving things up. You have to choose. You have to sacrifice the other possibilities.
That's really powerful. It sounds like real freedom isn't about infinite options, but about acknowledging the limits and choosing consciously within them. Which brings us to this really central idea in the book. The kind of liberation that comes from actually facing our finitude, our limited time.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about Martin Heidegger's idea here, being towards death. Now, obviously, we have to acknowledge Heidegger's own political history is deeply problematic.
Absolutely. Important context.
But his philosophical thoughts on this specific topic, on finitude, are pretty distinct and widely seen as, well, profound. He argued that living authentically means facing up to our limits, being aware that, this moment, it all actually might be the last one. This isn't a practice run.
Yeah, and that's tough, right? Because our default setting seems to be avoidance, what Heidegger called falling.
Falling.
Yeah, like
Well,
falling away from authenticity. We distract ourselves, we bury ourselves in busyness, we make endless plans. Basically anything to escape that intimidating responsibility of having to choose what to do with the finite time we have.
because if we could just get everything done, we wouldn't have to choose.
Exactly. It offers this illusion of comfort, but it's a stultifying comfort, the book argues. Only by facing that finitude, that limitation, can we actually step into a real, authentic relationship with life.
And there's that thought experiment from the philosopher Martin Hegelin that really hammers this home.
Oh, yeah, the eternal life one.
Right. If life went on forever, would anything really matter?
His argument is basically no, nothing could truly matter in the same way, because why would you ever commit to doing something now if you have infinite time? The answer would always be, who cares? There's always tomorrow. Literally.
Yeah. He points to that funny magazine headline, Heaven, will it be boring?
Exactly. It's the mortality, the limit, that actually infuses things with meaning and urgency.
You really see this play out with people who've had, close calls, brushes with death.
Yeah, the book mentions Marion Coutts, whose husband had a brain tumor. These experiences, as awful as they are, often force a more honest relationship with time.
It's not necessarily about being happier in a simple sense.
No, not necessarily. It's more about a new depth, maybe. The book uses phrases like bright sadness or sober joy. It's like a deeper, maybe more real encounter with life as it actually is.
Right. And even for those of us, thankfully, who haven't faced something that dramatic, it's still worth thinking about this idea that everything is borrowed time.
Hmm.
Why do we sort of assume that infinite time is the default setting and
Yeah.
being mortal is some kind of outrageous cosmic error? The book argues it's almost incomprehensibly miraculous that we get any time at all.
Yeah, there's that story about David Kane in Toronto.
Oh, tell us that one.
So he was just in a neighborhood Greek town tying his shoe, totally normal day. Then 2 weeks later, there was a terrible shooting right there on that same street, killed 2 people.
Wow.
And, rationally, he wasn't that close to danger, but the experience just brought home this truth. I happen to be alive, and there's no cosmic law entitling me to the status. Being alive is just happenstance, and not one more day is guaranteed.
And realizing that can actually foster gratitude
Right.
for the time we do have.
Immense gratitude, yeah.
Okay, so if we accept all this, we're finite, we can't do everything.
Yeah.
How do we actually use our limited time well? Because the challenge clearly isn't getting everything done. We've established that's impossible.
Right. The real challenge, according to the book, is deciding what not to do and how to feel at peace about not doing it.
Feeling at peace about not doing it. That's the hard part.
Totally. Greg Kretsch even says we need to learn to get better at procrastinating.
Better at procrastinating. How does that work?
Well, the key insight is You're always procrastinating. On almost everything you could be doing, you can't not procrastinate.
Okay.
So the goal isn't to eliminate it, because you can't. The goal is to choose wisely what you're going to procrastinate on, to deliberately neglect the less important things so you can focus on what really matters.
So the measure of a good time management technique isn't whether it helps you do more, but whether it helps you neglect the right things.
Precisely. Neglect the right things.
This reminds me of that idea from Jessica Abel, paying yourself first.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one.
If something really matters, your creative work and a key relationship, maybe some kind of activism, you can't wait for it, leftover time,
No way, that time never comes.
right? You have to actually carve out time for it today, this week, even if it's just a little bit. Otherwise, you'll never magically finish everything else and find yourself with huge chunks of free time. It just doesn't happen.
And there's that Warren Buffett story too, right? The one about the pilot.
Oh, yeah, the list. Tell us that one.
Apparently, he told his pilot to list his top 25 life goals, then circle the top 5,
Okay.
and then, the crucial part, take the other 20 and make a new list. The avoid at all costs list.
Avoid them. Why?
Because those are the ones that are most dangerous. They're appealing enough to distract you, to seduce you away from the things that truly matter most. You have to actively fight them off.
That's such a powerful way to think about focus, making conscious choices about what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's not just other tasks distracting us. Sometimes it's our own perfectionism. That can be a form of procrastination too, can it?
Oh, absolutely. The book has this amazing story about an architect from Shiraz.
What did he do?
So he supposedly designed the world's most beautiful mosque
Hmm.
on paper, absolutely perfect design.
Yeah.
And then he burned the plans.
He burns them. Why on earth?
Because the mosque in his head, the one on paper, was perfect, and he couldn't stand the thought of actually building it, of bringing it into the real world with all its necessary compromises, imperfections, and, finitude.
So he'd rather keep the fantasy than face the messy reality.
Exactly. Better to cherish the perfect fantasy than deal with the limitations of reality. And that kind of perfectionism stops so many of us from actually finishing things, from bringing valuable work into the world.
And this avoidance of finitude, this procrastination,
Yeah.
it doesn't just mess up our work projects, does it? It massively impacts our relationships too, our commitments.
Oh, huge impact. Yeah. Look at Franz Kafka and his agonizing relationship, mostly through letters with Felice Bauer.
What was his deal?
Kafka was totally torn. He had these two selves warring inside him, as he put it. He wanted to be like a respectable married man with Felice, but he also wanted to dedicate himself completely, utterly to his writing.
Couldn't do both.
He felt he couldn't, so he kept the relationship mainly in letters, kind of clinging to the idea of intimacy without letting it actually impinge on his writing time, which a real present relationship inevitably would.
So that indecision, that wanting to live multiple lives at once,
Yeah.
it stops you from truly committing to any of them.
Exactly. It keeps you in this sort of tentative mode of existence, as the book calls it, always hedging your bets. Like Henri Bergson said, the future looks like this array of equally attractive possibilities, and choosing one means losing the others.
So what's the liberating truth here then?
The liberating truth is you don't actually have a choice about settling. You will settle.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Robert Gooden apparently showed that even refusing to settle, trying to keep all options open, is just another way of You're settling for a life of non-commitment. You literally cannot have a fulfilling career or relationship without first settling on that path, choosing it over others.
Huh.
And not only should you settle, the argument goes, but you should maybe even make it harder to back out, like moving in together, getting married, making those commitments relatively irreversible.
Why irreversible? That sounds scary.
Well, the irony is research shows people are often much happier when they make irreversible commitments. There's that Daniel Gilbert experiment with the posters.
Oh yeah, the photography students?
Right. The students who couldn't change their minds about which photo print to keep ended up liking their chosen print far more than the students who had the option to swap it later.
Why?
Because once the choice is made, your brain basically gets busy finding reasons to appreciate what you have instead of constantly wondering about the alternatives. Commitment frees you up to actually enjoy things.
Okay, that's fascinating. It leads us nicely into thinking about attention then, and distraction. The book makes this really strong claim. Not just that attention is a finite resource, but that attention just is life.
Yeah, that's a powerful line.
Your actual experience of being alive is simply the sum total of whatever you pay attention to. So if you're paying attention to stuff you don't value, you're literally paying with your life.
It really reframes it, doesn't it?
It does. But does that mean the goal should be like relentless focus, total control over attention?
Well, no, that's another trap. Achieving total, perfect control over your attention. It's probably impossible, first of all, and maybe not even desirable.
Why not desirable?
Because you need your attention to be grabbed sometimes. You need to notice that beautiful sunset that just appears or, jump out of the way of a bus you weren't expecting. Our brains evolved to be distractible for good reasons, for survival.
Right, okay. But this is where the modern world, especially the online world, really throws a wrench in the works, doesn't it?
Oh, massively. The book describes the whole attention economy as basically a giant machine for persuading you to make the wrong choices about where you put your attention
How does it do that?
by optimizing for engagement, for what's compelling or outrageous, not necessarily for what's true or important. It distorts our view of the world. And it leaks into our offline time, too.
Yeah, the author talks about his own experience with Twitter, right? Getting sucked into these mental arguments.
Yeah, prosecuting these cases in his head against people with wrong opinions. Or even just seeing something amazing like the Northern Lights and his first thought being, oh, it looks like a screensaver.
Ouch. That's bleak.
It is, because it shows how even when you close the app, that distorted way of seeing those lingering arguments or feelings of anxiety, they stick with you. They change how you experience the rest of your life. And it's sneaky because the very thing you'd use to notice this your attention is already compromised.
But what's the real root cause here? Why are we so easily distracted? It can't just be the technology itself, can it?
The book argues it goes deeper. At its core, distraction is often an attempt to flee a painful encounter with our finitude.
Fleeing finitude. How?
It's about escaping the discomfort of facing our own limits, our limited control over things, the uncertainty of how things will turn out. When you really focus on something important, say, writing something or having a difficult conversation, you bump up against your limitations.
Like maybe your talent isn't enough or the conversation might go badly.
Exactly. You're forced to confront the fact that you're not fully in charge, that you can't guarantee the outcome. You have to give up those kind of godlike fantasies of total control. And distraction offers an easy escape from that uncomfortable reality.
So the usual fixes like digital detoxes or strict email rules, they often fail because they don't tackle that underlying urge to escape discomfort.
Pretty much, they treat the symptom, not the cause. So what's the real solution then?
Yeah, what is it?
Well, maybe paradoxically, the real solution is accepting that there is no easy solution. It's about accepting the lack of any solution, in a
Right.
way.
How does that help?
Think about Shinzen Young, that meditation teacher doing the ice water ritual. He found the more he fought the cold, the more he suffered. But when he just paid full attention to the actual physical sensations, however unpleasant, the suffering part, the agony, actually lessened.
So embracing the discomfort reduces the suffering.
Exactly. Accepting the reality of the situation, including the discomfort, the limitations, frees up your attention from railing against it so you can actually engage with what is. That acceptance is the liberation, even though it doesn't magically make the limits disappear.
Okay. That leads us to this idea of you are here really embracing the present moment. If distraction is about fleeing the present, the opposite is, well, being present.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not always easy either, is it? The book talks about this instrumentalization trap.
Yeah, what's that?
It's when our focus on using time well turns every moment every day into just a means to an end, something to get through, to reach some future goal, some future state of happiness that, well, it never quite arrives.
Right. You're always living for the future, essentially. Treating the present as just a stepping stone.
Yeah, like those tourists the book mentions at the British Museum, filming the Rosetta Stone on their phones instead of actually looking at it. They're planning to experience it later.
Yeah.
Or Alan Watts' critique of education, how it's often just endless preparation. Kids are always getting ready for the next grade, then college, then a career, never just allowed to be fully present in the stage they're in.
That really struck the author when he became a father, apparently.
Yeah, how so?
He realized he'd basically spent his whole adult life in this future-chasing mindset, and suddenly he had this baby, and he was buying all the how-to books, obsessing about, the optimal future results for his child.
Right here.
And he had this horrible realization that he was treating his own son like a tool for assuaging his own anxiety about the future, not just being present with the child he had now.
That's heavy. It reminds me of what Adam Gopnik called the causal catastrophe.
What's that? It's judging childhood only by how it prepares you for adulthood. It just sucks all the intrinsic value out of being a child. Like Tom Stoppard said, because children grow up, we think a child's purpose is to grow up, but a child's purpose is to be a child. Later is too late.
Wow. Later is too late. Okay, so how do we break free from this constant future focus? What's the antidote?
Well, there's that classic parable of the Mexican fisherman, you know that one.
Remind me.
So, this stressed out American businessman sees a fisherman relaxing by his boat, having caught just a few fish. The businessman tells him how he should work harder, buy more boats, build an empire, make millions, and then eventually he could retire rich, move to a small coastal village, sleep late, fish a little, play with his kids, take siestas, and, stroll into the village each evening where he could sip wine and play his guitar with his amigos.
And the fisherman asks.
The fisherman just asks, but what do I do now? He's already doing it.
Right. He's already there.
Exactly. It highlights Keynes' warning about purposiveness always being fixated on future goals. The purposive man, Keynes said, is always trying to secure a spurious immortality by projecting himself into the future. He never actually gets to love an actual cat or enjoy actual jam because he's always looking ahead. By trying too hard to make the most of his time, he ends up missing his actual life.
But just deciding to live in the moment isn't always simple or relaxing either, is it?
No, definitely not.
The author talks about trying to really savor the northern lights, but his brain just kept comparing it to a screensaver.
Yeah, that internal commentary.
Or that study where couples told to have more sex ended up being less happy.
Yeah.
It seems like trying too hard to force a profound present moment experience can backfire. It becomes just another task, another form of instrumentalizing the present.
Yeah, it's like the effort itself gets in the way. You have to let go of the demand for a specific kind of experience, which is, ironically, another attempt at control.
Okay. This leads us to thinking about rest, real rest, and this idea of idyllic living. John DeGraff, from that Take Back Your Time movement, he points out how weird it is that we feel we have to justify leisure by how useful it is for work. Like, I need this vacation to recharge so I can be more productive.
Yeah, it makes leisure feel like just another chore, doesn't it? Like Walter Kerr said, it's the decline of pleasure when everything has to have a purpose and instrument.
But this is a relatively new idea, historically speaking.
Totally. It's fascinating. For ancient Greeks like Aristotle, leisure wasn't the sideshow. It was the main event. It was the end to which everything else worth doing was a means. Business, negotium, literally meant not leisure.
Wow.
And even medieval peasants, despite hard lives, apparently had way more leisure time than we might think. Loads of religious holidays, festivals. Rest wasn't primarily about recovering for work. It was seen as an end in itself. It was industrialization that flipped it, making work the center and leisure just fuel for the work machine.
And that's led to this thing the book calls pathological productivity or idleness aversion.
Yeah, like that example of the novelist Danielle Steele writing for 20 hours a day. For some, work becomes a kind of refuge from difficult emotions or just stillness. Max Weber traced this back to the Protestant work ethic, this deep-seated inability to just be idle, using relentless work to prove your worthiness.
So in that context, the idea of the Sabbath, a dedicated regular day of not working, seems pretty radical.
It really is. It embodies this idea of enough. Enough work has been done. It's a deliberate pause in that permanent anxiety of striving for more. Walter Bregman describes it beautifully as a day for being on the receiving end of the gifts of God, feeling like you don't need to do anything more to justify your existence today.
And one way to cultivate this feeling, even outside of a religious context, is through these atelic activities. What does atelic mean exactly?
So atelic comes from the philosopher Kiran Satya. It refers to activities where the value isn't in reaching some final goal or end point. They can't really be completed.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Think about going for a walk or a hike just for the enjoyment of it, or listening to music. Or the book uses the example of Rod Stewart and his incredibly elaborate model railway.
Rod Stewart builds model trains.
Apparently, spends years on it. And the point is, he does it just for the love of doing it. It's subversive, the book says, because it offers zero payoff in terms of productivity, career advancement, or profit.
And the cool thing about these atelic hobbies is you don't have to be good at them.
Exactly. That's part of the freedom. It's okay, maybe even better, to be mediocre. Rod Stewart admits he's not technically brilliant at it. Karen Rinaldi writes about being an appalling surfer but loving it anyway. It's this freedom to suck without caring.
I love that. Freedom to suck without caring.
Yeah. It frees you from that constant, anxious need to use time well or achieve something exceptional. The value is purely in the doing, in the present enjoyment, not the outcome.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Let's talk about impatience. Breaking this impatience spiral and trying to cultivate patience.
A big one.
It feels like technology should make us more patient because things happen faster.
hmm
But the book argues it actually makes us more impatient. Why?
It's paradoxical, isn't it? The theory is that every time technology speeds something up, it sort of reinforces this underlying belief that we can eventually transcend all our limits, that we can achieve total control and instantaneous results.
Okay.
So when we inevitably hit a delay, even a tiny one, like waiting a minute for the microwave, it feels extra frustrating, almost like an affront, because it reminds us that we can't have that perfect control. It makes the remaining limits feel all the more maddeningly frustrating. We get addicted to the speed itself.
Addicted to speed. Wow. There's a psychotherapist mentioned Stephanie Brown.
Yeah, she compared this speed addiction, especially in high achievers like in Silicon Valley, to actual alcoholism. She noticed clients who felt almost physical pain if they had to just sit still.
Why? What was driving it?
She suggested the constant urgency was a kind of self-medication, a way to avoid feeling something else, maybe anxiety, emptiness, who knows. But it creates this vicious spiral, right? You push harder for control, which makes you more anxious when you inevitably fail, and the only solution you see is to push even harder, go even faster.
Ah, so how do you break that cycle?
Well, here's where that insight from Alcoholics Anonymous comes in, which is really profound.
What's that?
The paradoxical idea that you often can't beat an addiction until you completely give up all hope of beating it, in the sense of achieving total control. You have to surrender, you have to accept the unpalatable truth of your limitations, that you can't control things to the extent you desperately want to.
Surrender to limitation.
Okay. Only when you accept that limitation can you start working realistically with what is possible instead of constantly fighting reality.
So how do we actually cultivate patience as a skill then? Not just surrender, but actively build patience.
Yeah, there are some great examples. Jennifer Roberts, the art historian.
The 3-hour assignment?
Yeah. She makes her students just look at one painting or object for 3 solid hours.
3 hours.
Yeah. And she found herself looking at this painting, Boy with a Squirrel. It took her like 9 minutes just to notice how the boy's ear echoed the shape of the squirrel's belly, and 45 minutes to see other details. It takes time for things to reveal themselves.
Wow. Okay.
And M. Scott Peck, the psychiatrist who wrote The Road Less Traveled, he apparently thought he was useless at fixing things, a mechanical idiot, until a neighbor fixing a lawnmower told him, "That's because you don't take the time."
So Peck tried it.
Yeah, he patiently just looked at a stuck handbrake on his car, resisting the urge to just yank it, until eventually he saw the simple mechanical reason it was stuck. Patience revealed the solution.
These stories really make the case for slowing down. So what are the core principles we can take away for building patience?
The book suggests 3 main ones. First, develop a taste for problems.
A taste for problems,
Very
like
good.
enjoy them.
Not necessarily enjoy them in a masochistic way, but accept that life is fundamentally a process of engaging with problems. They're not annoyances getting in the way of real life. They are the substance of real life.
Well,
Stop treating them as things that shouldn't be happening.
okay, makes sense. What's second?
Second, embrace radical incrementalism.
Radical incrementalism.
Yeah. This comes from Robert Boyce's research on highly productive academics. They didn't work in marathon sessions. They worked in short, consistent bursts, maybe only 10 minutes sometimes or half an hour. And crucially, they often stopped even when they felt energetic.
Stop when they were on a roll. Why?
To build the muscle of patience, to make it easier to come back the next day and the day after that, it's about sustainable progress over the long haul, not burnout bursts.
Okay. Consistent, small steps. And the third principle.
Third is this idea that originality lies on the far side of unoriginality.
Explain that one.
It uses a parable from the photographer Arno Minkkinen about the Helsinki bus station. All the different bus routes start out sharing the same few stops downtown before they branch off to unique destinations.
Okay.
He says students often get discouraged early on when their work looks like everyone else's. They jump off the bus too soon. But real originality, real distinctiveness, often comes after you've patiently put in the time, mastering the fundamentals, doing the unoriginal work. You have to stay on the bus long enough to reach those unique places further out on the route.
Stay on the bus. I like that. Okay, so this theme of surrendering some control, embracing limits, It doesn't just apply to our individual schedules, does it?
Mm,
It also connects to how we relate to other people.
absolutely.
We often chase this ideal of individual time sovereignty,
Mm.
right? Like the digital nomad, completely free, controlling their own schedule. Sounds great. But the book argues there's a big downside.
Yeah, the cost is often loneliness, deep loneliness.
How so?
Mark Manson wrote about this, seeing the Taj Mahal alone, feeling empty. Or another nomad weeping, watching families just biking together in a park in Japan, realizing his freedom had cut him off from those simple shared human experiences. Every bit of personal time freedom you gain makes it harder to actually coordinate and connect with others.
So what people really need might not be more individual control, but actually more constraints.
Kind of, yeah. Or at least more shared rhythms. Terry Hardy calls it the social regulation of time. We might actually benefit from greater outside pressure to use our time in particular ways.
Like the historical examples you mentioned,
Yeah,
the Sabbath or the French summer holidays where everything shuts down.
exactly. Those forced collective pauses create opportunities for connection that total individual flexibility erodes.
And even on a smaller scale, like the Swedish fika.
Yeah. That daily coffee and cake break in Swedish workplaces, it's not optional, really. Everyone stops, mingles, hierarchy kind of dissolves for half an hour. Communication,
Yeah.
conviviality, it takes precedence over individual schedules, and it only works because people willingly give up a bit of their time sovereignty for the collective benefit.
And there's something powerful about just being in sync with others, physically even.
Yeah, William McNeill, the historian, wrote about this synchronized movement, things like military drills or communal singing or dancing. He found they foster incredible cohesion and this strange sense of personal enlargement, like losing yourself in the group rhythm makes time itself feel realer, more substantial.
Even just working together on something mundane can create that.
Apparently so. Like working smoothly together in a food co-op packing line, that shared rhythm builds connection.
And this has political dimensions too, doesn't it? The loss of synchronicity.
Yeah, Hannah Arendt argued that totalitarian movements actually prey on atomized, isolated individuals. When we lose those shared rhythms and communal ties, it makes grassroots politics, collective action, much harder to organize. Though when it does happen, like in mass protests, people often report that same feeling of personal enlargement, of being part of something bigger.
So the choice we face as individuals is whether to just go along with this modern push for total individual time control or to actively resist it,
Exactly. And resisting means deliberately making commitments that reduce your flexibility, but offer the rewards of community instead.
like joining groups, clubs, choirs.
Yeah, prioritizing actual physical meetups over just digital convenience. Letting family and friends sometimes mess up your perfect routine because the connection matters more. The book has that great line, your time, it turns out, can be too much your own.
Can be too much your own.
Yeah.
Okay, so to kind of pull all these threads together as we wrap up, let's talk about this final concept. Cosmic insignificance therapy.
Sounds bracing.
It does. We often feel this pressure, don't we? This paralysis almost, that our life has to be massively important, hugely consequential, remarkable, otherwise it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, the pressure to leave a huge mark.
But what's the therapy part? What's a liberating truth?
It comes from the philosopher Brian McGee, apparently, and it's blunt. Quote, what you do with your life doesn't matter all that much, and when it comes to how you're using your finite time, the universe absolutely could not care less.
Oof. The universe doesn't care.
Nope. It's our egocentricity bias, right?
Yeah.
We naturally see everything from our own perspective, making our tiny little lifespan feel like the absolute center of history. But from a cosmic perspective, not so much.
But this isn't supposed to be depressing. How is it liberating?
Because it's a profound release. It frees you from these crushing, over-demanding standards of remarkableness. If the universe doesn't care if you're famous or change the world, then you're free to find value in, well, modestly meaningful actions.
Like what?
Like preparing a decent meal for your kids, writing a novel that maybe only a few people will read, but it connects with them, having any kind of job or role that just makes things slightly better for those it serves. Small acts of care, of creation, of service, they matter on a human scale, and that's enough.
That is relief. It connects to that feeling during the pandemic, maybe?
Yeah.
The great pause.
Yeah, Julio Vincent Gambudo called it possibility shock. That forced slowdown made a lot of people realize life could be different. It highlighted what actually felt important: community, nature, simple pleasures, often things that had been drowned out by the usual bullshit, as he put it. It was a chance to maybe redefine what normal should even mean.
Okay, so to help listeners really grapple with all this and apply it, The author ends with 5 key questions to kind of live with. Let's go through them. First, where in your life or your work are you currently pursuing comfort when what's called for is a little discomfort? What's an example of that?
That could be, pushing through the resistance to start a difficult project, or initiating that awkward but necessary conversation, or just accepting the discomfort of not feeling totally in control.
Okay, second question. What impossible standards are you holding yourself to, and can you let them crash to the ground?
This is about embracing strategic underachievement, maybe. Accepting you can't be amazing at everything. Maybe letting yourself fail sometimes, or recognizing that some goals just aren't realistic right now, being okay with good enough.
Third, in what ways have you yet to accept the fact that you are who you are, not the person you think you ought to be?
Ooh, that's a big one. It's about dropping the performance, maybe. Stopping trying to constantly earn your weeks, prove your worthiness, and instead just starting from where you actually are with the strengths and weaknesses you actually have and doing some good from there.
Right. Fourth, in which areas of life are you still holding back until you feel like you know what you're doing?
Ugh, the waiting until I'm ready trap. The liberating secret here, the book says, is that pretty much everyone is winging it all the time. Seriously, even the experts, knowing that can free you up to just to try things, contribute now, without waiting for some mythical state of perfect competence.
Everyone is winging it.
Huh.
I like that too.
Mhm.
Okay, and the fifth and final question. How would you spend your days differently if you didn't care so much about seeing your actions reach fruition?
This one's about detaching from the outcome. Think about those medieval stonemasons building a cathedral they knew they'd never live to see finished. Or scientists searching for alien life, or people cataloging endangered species. Their daily work is meaningful in itself, even if they don't see the final result. Can you find meaning in the process, not just the product?
Hmm, those are powerful questions to sit with. And it all seems to boil down to that Carl Jung advice you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, when someone asked him how to live in a challenging world, he basically said, just figure out the next and most necessary thing that's right in front of you and quietly do it. That simple act, done with focus and conviction, is always meaningful, even when the bigger picture feels overwhelming or uncertain.
Okay, so we started this whole deep dive with that kind of shocking number 4,000 weeks.
Mm.
Feels short.
Mm-hmm.
But the real takeaway, the real liberation, it seems, isn't about finding some magic trick to get more time or control it perfectly. It's
Mm-hmm.
about abandoning that whole impossible quest.
Exactly, accepting our finitude, letting go of the struggle against it.
And that leads to this final, really radical idea from Derek Jensen, going beyond hope.
Yeah, that sounds bleak, but it's not meant as despair.
Explain that. How is being beyond hope not despair?
Well, hope, in the sense Jensen means it, is often passive. It's waiting for some external force, some cavalry, to ride in and save the day. It can actually stop us from acting because we're waiting to feel secure first. Jensen's point is that the terrible eventuality we spend our lives bracing against uncertainty, loss, limitation, the world's brokenness in many ways, it's already happened. It's the baseline condition.
The world is already broken. Your 4,000 weeks were always running out. You were never going to achieve perfect security or total control.
Right. And when you really get that deep down, it's not depressing. The book argues it can trigger this energizing surge of motivation
No.
because you realize you never actually needed that feeling of perfect security or control to begin with. You can let go of trying to achieve the impossible, and that frees you up. Once you stop needing to constantly reassure yourself that everything's fine and under control, you're liberated to actually focus your limited energy on just doing a few things that count, doing what seems valuable right here, right now, in this imperfect, finite life.
Wow. So embracing the brevity, embracing the limits, embracing the brokenness, it's not a reason for despair. It's actually a cause for profound relief.
That's the core message, I think. Relief.
You get to finally give up trying to be this impossible person, this optimized, infinitely capable, emotionally invincible, fully independent person that modern culture tells you you should be.
Yeah, you can let go of that exhausting ideal.
And instead, you just get to roll up your sleeves and start work on what's gloriously possible within your actual limited, messy, finite life.
Mm-hmm.
Find the enjoyment right here in the present. Like George Orwell, finding joy even in the middle of wartime London, just because it was spring. He wrote, "Spring is here, even in London N1, and they can't stop you enjoying it."
A perfect final thought, finding that defiant joy in the midst of it all.